Welcome to the Navigator Podcast. Welcome to the Navigate Academy Module 54 podcast on strategically aligning your software suite. My guest today is John Graham, Executive Vice President of Solutions360. With over 2 decades of proven leadership in driving business growth and innovation, John is passionate about leveraging technology to solve complex business challenges. His expertise spans sales management, strategic planning, operational excellence, and fostering high-performance teams. I asked John to share with us some of the lessons he's learned from selling and implementing ERP systems for the last 20 years in the systems integration market. Welcome, John. Good to have you.
It's great to be here, Brad. I'm really excited. I've been watching the Navigate Academy forever, and this is the first time you've asked me to be here, so I'm very excited.
Well, I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or a slight, but I know you, so I'll just take it as both. So
that's right.
There you go. So we can do this positive or negative perspective. Let's play positive because we can talk about all the bad things, but let's do what happens well. So what are three key factors that your experience shows will determine the successful selection of an ERP system?
Yeah, it's hard to boil down to three, and it's amazing over the 25 years or so that I've been doing this. There really isn't a lot of consensus on how people go about selecting ERP systems. So, but there's definitely some clear winners, and some of this I do a lot of companies early on in the sales cycle. So, a lot of stuff is held very close to the chest when I'm dealing with somebody. But quite often when I find out that an implementation has gone well, I go back to our team and find out, and I can go back to the customer and ask them, what did you do to prepare both in the selection process and the implementation side? And it's quite revealing for those that have a difficult or challenging time during the implementation, which is indicative of a good selection or not.
Exactly.
So there are some very clear items that I've seen come forward from these companies. And the first one is communication to the entire company. So quite often companies will make a decision to fix something. And in the realm of this conversation, it's about replacing software. So unless, in most people, they're running software day in and day out. They've defined their career around this. So if the company just announces that we're making this change and all of a sudden the selection process is in the rearview mirror, the frontline staff will question it at best and worry about it in the worst case scenario. So communicating, the executive team or the leader of the organization, communicate to the entire staff about why you're doing this. What are you trying to change within that? So that eliminates a lot of fear, which is the very first thing that will lead to success. It's explaining, what are we trying to do? Why are we looking at new software? Because all of it is indicative of a change, which is a scary word for just about everybody. But why are we doing this? And maybe it's to increase profitability. It's to increase growth without adding administrative staff. Maybe it's something as simple as closing out your monthly periods more quickly. But if you can paint that story early on and make sure everybody feels comfortable with that, but the why behind your going through this, then that's the first indicator that the rest of the selection process will go really well.
Okay. What factors will flip it? What factors get in the way? And I mean, we can, do the opposite, so non-communication. What are some things?
One of the things
kind of cringe when you talk to people? You're like, ooh.
Yeah, one element of that is, if you don't communicate, everybody in the company is going to make up their own story anyway, right? So then you end up with all these backstories, and all that does is create an environment where people can resist something. And if they're not included, then they can resist it to the detriment of the project, right? They go into self-preservation mode. I need to hang on to my specialness or hang on to, what I've defined my career as, rather than looking at the vision of where a company's going and being part of that and making sure that I contribute to the success.
Got it. So let's shift. We'll do kind of all three phases: buying it, implementing it, and then ultimately using it. So where do you see things go well in implementation?
Yeah. Well, let me start with still the selection process, because These two dovetail into each other.
Yep.
There's real no clear demarcation point. One leads to the other. The other element I've seen that leads to success, which is directly tied to the success of an implementation, is including frontline staff in your needs analysis. And companies will have a varying degree of maturity on that. They will just go to their manual policies and procedures and say, this is what we need. Meanwhile, that's a 10-year-old document that's collected dust and nobody really follows it. They've all had their workarounds. So you can have a real blind spot to the way you really operate versus what your published policies and procedures are. So include those frontline staff, and it might just be a key person in each department, and really dig into what they do and ask them about the little nuanced things that can have a ripple effect if it's not done in a negative fashion. And it's, a real linchpin element of that. And part of that is really challenging the status quo. People will tell you what they do because they want to tell you what you want to hear, as opposed to, yeah, this is a nightmare and I use this spreadsheet over here and I know I shouldn't be doing it, but it's the only way I can make this work for the downstream process that's there.
Got it. So shifting into adoption, and again, it's kind of the promise that you made when you kind of sell is like going, you're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
What do you see gets in the way there, or the best companies, how do they ensure that they actually get adoption and good usage?
Right. Well, part of the adoption and usage and happy customers, right? Those are loaded terms. And one of the things that's really hard on any kind of sort of big initiative or big project is defining success. And the only way you can do that is right up front. So it goes right back to the beginning of the conversation. What are we trying to do? Remember, we painted that picture to the entire staff. So what are we trying to do? Which leads to, okay, now we've defined what the success criteria is. And it might be going back to, we're going to increase net profit by 10%, because traditionally in our job costing, we've always had great gross profit, but net profit at the end of the year is very disappointing. So how do we change that, right? Or maybe it's, as I said, closing a month end in 5 days. Maybe it's customer satisfaction scores. Whatever it might be. So that ends up being your criteria for success. And more importantly, to know when you're done. Implementing software like ours, a full ERP system, is a monstrous effort. And there's all kinds of moving parts. So if you don't define it up front, now all of a sudden you're at the tail end of a project and people are, nobody's ever going to be completely happy across the company because the button's in the wrong place or the color's not right, or there's 2 extra steps compared to what I used to do in a spreadsheet. So all of that becomes noise and a never-ending cycle of change orders or disappointment or complaint. So if you can tie up these clear business objectives at the very beginning of the project, and now we can use that as our criteria at the end of the project, saying we've been successful. Yes, we've got a parking lot, and we've got a bunch of phase 2 things to do, but it's handled in a much more organized fashion. And it really helps both organizations, the vendor and the customer, to have a good working relationship for that initial project and the relationship down the road.
Well, and I think just from that adoption, if we say we want net profit, or if we say we want month-end close, we got to show it after the fact and actually measure it. And in the management meetings say, this is how we're doing now that we've done this. So again, I think that sometimes we have a dream, we implement, and then we forget the dream, or we don't ever tie it back to the actual usage of the tool. And as you said, also the frontline people got to know why they're doing what they're doing and see that they're making a difference.
Right. Exactly. And that buy-in that's established early on really has an effect on the implementation, right? If you don't include people and you don't get their buy-in where they can challenge the various selection softwares that you're selecting, then they have the opportunity to be resistors, and that never serves any good. Just wastes time, creates risk, and ultimately costs money. So when you get that buy-in, and it just has to be really the departmental leads at the very least, but getting that front line, now when the challenges start percolating up in a project, you've got people leaning into it and trying to solve the problem rather than sitting back going, hey, I told you guys this would fail. I was right, you were wrong type thing, which is a very unhealthy way. And it takes forever to correct that.
Right. So you've been doing this a while,
Yep.
and you've got some wins. What are some of your most gratifying moments or feedback from this journey?
Yeah, it's funny, Brad. I have been doing sales for a very long time, and traditional sales answer, especially from anybody in operations, is the sale. Winning the deal is the ultimate a success or gratifying sort of milestone, but it's not for me. It happens really early in the sales cycle, and there are really two approaches that prospects take. One is challenging you, and that's over and above the healthy challenge, right? They need to understand how the software works and everything else, versus a cooperative approach. So as soon as I see a prospect that has done some of this homework that we talked about, and that's very clearly indicated when we do a discovery meetings with them, but they're working with us. They want to say, okay, show me your software, let's dig into it. And it's a nuance, but they go, yeah, I can see how that would work, but what if it did this? And we're collaborating.
Got it.
Versus, oh, that won't work for us, that's not what we do today, that type of thing, where you're just pushing water uphill. So that, I find that very gratifying. It makes for a really great sales cycle. It starts the very beginning of a partnership. And in Solutions360, that's our motto. We strive to be our customers' most valued business partner. And it starts in the sales cycle. So I can see clear indications that this will be a friction-based relationship long-term, versus we have a partner here, and we will be successful over time with that.
Got it. Well, thank you. I appreciate your insights.
Hey, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
Thanks.